All right, well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. It's great to see everyone here. My name is Kathleen Stevens, and I'm president of the Korea Economic Institute. It's a great pleasure to have Professor Kim Jong-un here today, among other things. I never say old friend anymore, but a great friend to many of us in this room, including, if I may say myself. And as you can see atop this lovely photo here, we've given this gathering the title of President Moon's Policy Towards North Korea, Working with the U.S. for Peace and Security on the Korea Peninsula. And I think we actually came up with this title when we heard that Professor Moon was coming to the U.S., even before we knew that as we sit here today, President Trump and Chairman Kim have both arrived in Hanoi. And given the time difference, we'll be having dinner sometime soon. So it couldn't be, to say a cliche that's not a cliche here, any more timely, I think, to have Professor Moon Jae-in here to, no, see, that's Professor Kim Jong-un. That's only the first time I'll make that mistake. To talk about, if you like, these two themes as I see them. One is the Moon government's policy towards North Korea, and also the U.S. South Korea relationship, alliance, and working together. I think, as many of you know, obviously, Kim Jong-un, that's why you're here. He is not president of the Republic of Korea, but he is special advisor to the president, with whom he shares a surname, but not a family relationship, as far as I know. But of course, they've known each other for a long time. And of course, Professor Kim Jong-un has a long history as one of Korea's leading public intellectuals. He's been in and out of government and academia in the Republic of Korea for many, many years. He is well known for his prolific writing and speaking on the issues on the Korean Peninsula, particularly with respect to North Korea. And he's also, over the years, I might say, served both in his kind of intellectual capacity as well as, I would say, as personally, as a very important link between the United States and the Republic of Korea, really promoting the kind of very active, dynamic dialogue that I think characterizes the modern relationship between our two countries. So I'm not going to read his bio to you. I think you have it there. But it is really an honor to welcome you here for, I know it's going to be a very busy couple of days, but we're very, very pleased to have you here for this public forum. Now, in terms of what we're going to do today, obviously there are a lot of cameras here, but we welcome our audience. We really want to respond to you, but given the size, we're not going to take questions from the floor. However, I think you had a chance to pick up a piece of paper and find a pen. It's like filling out your immigration form here. So please, anytime during the next 45 minutes or so, write down a question if you like and pass it to the aisle. And starting around 1 o'clock or maybe a little bit before, depending on how we go. I think we have until about 1:30, right? We'll have a conversation, but I'll start off with a lot of what Professor Moon, when I previewed, said were hard, provocative questions, but he would expect no less. And I hope you'll have some for him as well. Maybe not provocative, but anyway, a lot of hard questions. I do have some questions. I also have some things kind of hot off the press, if you like, including something I have here, which we'll get to, which says, tentative Hanoi deal details leaked. So we can talk about what we think the deal will be, at least as reported in the newspapers. But given that we have a little time here, I'd like to step back with Professor Moon and again welcome you very warmly again to Washington, and ask you, with this summit about to commence, really commencing in Vietnam between the American president and DPRK Chairman Kim. There's obviously intense interest in what's going to come out, and we really do especially want to hear from you, obviously, the South Korean perspective. But even before we get to that, I really kind of want to get your thoughts, because we haven't had a chance to really talk about this with you here. I mean, how do we get here? and kind of where are we now? If you could just do a little bit of scene setting for us, and maybe in particular, how the scene looks right now from South Korea. Just give us a few words on that. There's a lot. Just as some believe we're here today because of the maximum pressure campaign. Others think it's because Kim Jong-un really decided he was done with his program for now, and now he was going to pivot to diplomacy and focusing on the North Korean economy. Some would say it's because of the friendship between President Trump and Chairman Kim, or for that matter, between President Moon and Chairman Kim that's developed. So just like kind of your assessment of how where we are today and how we got here.
Yeah, just you go back to year 2017, President Moon was inaugurated May 9th, and then he was ready to have a dialogue with North Korea. And he has been sending lots of signals to Pyongyang.
Oh, here, unmute. Here.
This one?
Yeah.
You know, you go back to 2017. President Moon was inaugurated May 9th, and our government was sending a lot of so-called signals to Pyongyang so that we can have a meaningful dialogue. But North Korea didn't respond to it. Instead, North Korea responded with 15 rounds of ballistic missile, test launch, and one nuclear testing, which is a big one, okay, which North Korea called hydrogen bomb, with more than 150 kiloton of destructive power. President Moon was very angry, and therefore in year 2017, he was really, devoting himself to military deterrence and strengthening alliance with the United States. But what was more worrisome was what, President Trump and his staff were coming up with whole, new ideas, all the options on the table, and General McMaster was talking about the preventive war against North Korea, and President Trump gave that famous speech at the General Assembly of the United Nations, saying that if North Korea, hurt, United States and its allies, that we will totally destroy North Korea, okay? And then mainstream pundits as well as Miss Media was suggesting possibility of surgical strike on North Korea, or the preventive or the preemptive actions in North Korea, and even after North Korea test launched in Hwasong-15, the intercontinental ballistic missile, then a lot of military folks were talking about the possibility of bloody nose strategy on North Korea. Therefore, it's a bad year. But in year 2018, there is a great reversal, okay? And that started with Kim Jong-un's New Year's speech. And we instantly grabbed it and proposed to have a high-level talks. That was January 4th, 2018. Since then on, okay, February 9th, North Korea sent a special delegation to South Korea to attend the opening ceremony of Pyeongchang Winter Olympic. Chairman Kim Jong-nam and younger sister of Kim Jong-un, Kim Yo-jong, came down. They had a very warm time with President Moon Jae-in. And then again, February 26th, during the closing ceremony of Pyeongchang Winter Olympic, Kim Young-chul, the Vice Chairman of Central Committee of Korea Workers' Party, as well as the head of Department of United Front of Korea Workers' Party, came down. And apparently, during his visit, North-South worked out all the details. And then, special envoy, President Moon Jae-in, Ambassador Chung Yong, and
Oh, so your mic has dropped off.
That's like a pen.
Uh-oh.
Well, I would, But I will use this. Wow. And then it's getting some bit lengthy, but I think it was mentioning it. And really, when our special envoys visited Pyongyang, really Chairman Kim Jong-un surprised them. Okay, why? Because he first said, okay, I'm willing to have a summit by the end of April. And also he agreed to have hotlines between two leaders. And also he mentioned that if the United States does not pose a nuclear threat to us, there is no reason for us to have nuclear weapons. And denuclearization is the will of his grandfather and father. And also even Chairman Kim Jong-un went further. Okay, we want to have a dialogue with the United States. We hope the Seoul, play a role of kind of mediator between Pyongyang and Washington. And also he mentioned that if the United States and South Korea does not pose, the threat to North Korea by holding, joint military exercise and training, there is no reason for us to pose a, conventional and nuclear threat to South Korea. And finally, he agreed to have exchange of performing arts, groups between North and South. That was the beginning of change. And then after that was March 5th and 6th, immediately after they returned, Ambassador Chung and Dr. Seoul came to Washington and had a meeting with President Trump, and President Trump willingly agreed to have a meeting with, Chairman Kim Jong-un. Then in April 27th, we had the Panmunjom Summit, and then that was followed by the Singapore Summit between President Trump and Chairman Kim Jong-un on June 12th. There was some ups and downs between June to all the way to September, okay? And particularly toward the end of August, U.S. DPRK relations hit the bottom, okay? And you remember that President Trump instantly scrapped Secretary Pompeo's planned visit to Pyongyang in early September because of some nasty letter which Kim Jong-un wrote. And then President Moon hastened his summit with Kim Jong-un, and they come up with a Pyongyang Declaration. And as a result of the Pyongyang summit, Secretary Pompeo could visit Pyongyang again. That was his fourth visit to Pyongyang. And the visit was very, very successful. Then again, there's ups and downs in November and December. Okay? But finally, Steve Biegun made very important progress. Mm-hmm. Therefore, if you look at this progress, there was, really, in 2017, I remember that I gave an interview to war correspondents, more than 10 war correspondents from all over the world. And year 2018, I gave individual interviews to more than 20 diplomatic correspondents. Okay, that really shows the changing atmosphere on the Korean Peninsula. Therefore, from crisis to great reversal, and now, slow moves toward, denuclearization and peace on the Korean Peninsula.
Well, thank you. I mean, we'll get to where we think the moves are going, but I just want to probe a little more on, I know you've been looking at North Korea for a long time. It's very hard to determine, at least I think for us here, what the motivation is. But you said you were surprised. I mean, all of you were surprised in early February 2018 when the South Korean representatives went to Pyongyang and Kim Jong-un said all of these surprising things about what he was ready to do. I mean, what's your sense about why? What were his major motivations? And then secondly, if those motivations were so strong, then why after Singapore, which President Trump came back and said was a great success, did they not make any moves? Did Pyongyang not move towards fulfilling, even towards having meetings for such a long time?
Well, the way I read, I was in Pyongyang during the Pyongyang summit last September, and that was my third time. I was lucky to attend the first Pyongyang summit as a special guest in 2000, and second Pyongyang summit in 2007, and the September 18th last year was my third visit to Pyongyang as a special delegate. I think the economy matters, but it was not out of desperation. Okay, and really, I really don't think that the sanction and maximum pressure created a situation of desperation in North Korea. Okay, when I went to Pyongyang, things are moving around. Okay, and I couldn't feel, at least in Pyongyang, I couldn't sense any desperateness out of sanctions. Okay, but on the other hand, maybe some people argue that Kim Jong-un wanted to have both, wanted to have eat the cake and have it. Therefore, while having nuclear weapons, he wanted to have economic development. But I think that his motives lies somewhere in between. Okay, and one interesting observation what I had was this: when I attended the first summit in 2000 and the second summit in 2007, wherever I went to, Greater Pyongyang Theater or the Mangyongdae, Youth Palace or the Inmin Munha공장 People's Cultural Palace or May 1st Stadium, half of audience were all soldiers. Okay? And military politics first slogan was everywhere. But this time I couldn't see military first politics slogan. Everything was in the economy, and I couldn't see any soldiers in those performing plays. It was amazing. And was when I watched the North Korean children's performance at the Mangyongdae Youth Palace. And what they're saying is what? Learn from the success of Yeomyang Street. Yeomyang Street is behind the Kim Il-sung University, in the high-rise building areas, the most prosperous area in Pyongyang. They're let's learn from the Yeomyang Street. Science and technology. They have everything in the economy. Okay? Therefore, I would say that even though North Korea was not desperate, Chairman Kim Jong-un might be interested in having a better economy so that he can ensure or assure his longevity and staying in power. Okay? But therefore, that is kind of the motivation behind his move. And what is your second question?
It was with that motivation. Why then, after the apparent success of Singapore, was there this long hiatus?
No, because I think in my personal opinion, both sides were driven by the old inertia. Okay, American position was what after Singapore Declaration, when Secretary Pompeo visited Pyongyang in July, his position was you got to accept the declaration and inspection first, and more than that, overall American stance was this: you dismantle first, then we'll reward you. And also, the American government sending a signal saying all in one, all or nothing, and particularly Mr. John Bolton raising that issue. Okay, and also the American government has been almost methodical in pursuing the sequence of freezing, declaration, inspection, verification, and dismantling. Okay, but on the other hand, the North Korean position is very clear. Okay, look, we cannot accept dismantle first and reward later. North Korean position is we cannot trust you. You cannot trust either. Their position is let us have this incremental, simultaneous exchange based on the principle of action for action. Okay, and all in one, all or nothing. And they argue that it's like North Korea is not the so-called defeated nation. We haven't surrendered. You cannot pursue all in one or all or nothing kind of approach. Okay, and third, North Korean position is this. This has been widely reported. That is, North Korea has been arguing that we cannot accept declaration and inspection first. Meaning what? United States is our enemy, and U.S. consider North Korea as an enemy. How can we come up with a list of nuclear facilities, materials, nuclear weapons, and ballistic missile, and give it to the enemy? It is like it is tantamount to giving hit list, attack list to the enemy. If we cannot do that until we have some kind of trust between Washington and Seoul. Another basic argument is this: according to the American intelligence community estimate, North Korea is known to have 60 to 65 nuclear bombs, even and plus. But the North Koreans argue that look, if you have less than 60, and we report to you with a list, then you accuse us of cheating the U.S. Then entire negotiation will be derailed. Therefore, unless we build some kinds of trust between, between two countries, then two leaders, we cannot accept the inspection and the declaration and inspection first approach. But those kinds of things have delayed the process. Therefore, even after Singapore summit, there have been ups and downs, and at every critical juncture, our government, President Moon Jae-in, intervened and tried to bring those two leaders together and two countries together. Then now, since December last year, really, U.S.-South Korean relations have become kind of watertight, airtight. We have very close, coordination. Steve Biegun initially complained about the South Korean attitude. Later, South Korea and the United States have formed a working group, and Steve Biegun and Lee Do-hun were meeting almost every 2 weeks. Okay, and also Steve Biegun went to Pyongyang. Before he went to Pyongyang, he dropped in Seoul, had a quite wide range of discussions with South Korean government officials. And after he returned from Pyongyang, again dropped in Seoul and discussions with wide variety, the foreign ministry, Blue House, and our intelligence agency. Therefore, I would say that there has been very close coordination between the U.S. and South Korea. That was one of the factors which made the current progress possible.
So instead of the sort of rift between Seoul and Washington that many people worry might develop or might have developed in the aftermath of these kind of historic summits, you've seen a pattern of a drawing together and increasing the cooperation. But I hear you also saying that you see some adjustment, and I think certainly many observers here do too, in an adjustment in the Trump administration's approach, which was kind of spelled out probably in more detail in Steve Biegun's speech at Stanford a few weeks ago, but which we also see in the kinds of things that President Trump has been saying in the run-up to the summit of kind of managing expectations in a somewhat different, again, not entirely consistent across the administration, and that's not unique to this administration. It's sometimes a little more stark, but do you welcome, I take it, then these adjustments in the positions?
There has been a profound change in American attitude in dealing with North Korea. If you read occasional comments by Secretary Pompeo, now he's talking about peace mechanism. In the past, the United States never mentioned about peace mechanism. And also Steve Biegun, at his speech at Stanford, he emphasized the importance of coming up with a roadmap for negotiation, not roadmap for nuclear dismantling. That's very important. Therefore, I would say that the Trump administration has become extremely practical, realistic, and flexible. And I think that's a good sign that future negotiations will be successful.
Okay, so we're pretty well teed up for the summit, and I want to get to that. But just before we get to that, I want to ask you to just maybe speak for a few more moments about something I don't think gets enough attention here in the United States, and that is what's happened in the inter-Korean relationship, or indeed what has not happened over the last year. The Pyongyang Declaration had a number of pretty concrete confidence-building measures that we're committed to, and I understand that some of them, many of them, have been implemented. I mean, could you give us your assessment of how far that has gone, what the impact has been, if you like, on trust and confidence building between the two Koreas, and what still remains to be done?
If you look at the Panmunjom Declaration, Article 2 is all about the tension reduction and confidence building measures between two Koreas, what specialists call the operational arms control. Okay? And that reappeared in the Pyongyang Declaration as Article 1, and North-South Korea signed military agreement. Okay? There is a further elaboration of Article 2 of Panmunjom Declaration. But I would say that there has been really profound progress inter-Korean military confidence building measures and inter-Korean operational arms control. Okay? Now, starting from November 1st, North-South Korea suspended all hostilities under the ground, under sea, and in the air. And North-South Korea removed 11 guard posts along the DMZ. Okay. North Korean side, North Korea removed over 4,500 landmines. South Korean side only 29 landmines. Okay. And also North-South Korea teamed up survey team on the so-called the lower part of the Han River, and they conducted the survey, and they come up with a joint map for the Han River side. And also right now, our government is working with North Korea to come up with the practical measures to reduce tension in the West Sea. Okay? And I'm hoping that by April or May that we may make some substantial progress to prevent any kinds of accidental crashes in the West Sea. Definitely, humongous progress. But unfortunately, Western mass media, even Korean mass media, have not paid attention to that progress. Therefore, I would say that operational arms control between North and South Korea has made substantial progress. How about another aspect of peacemaking? There is End of War Declaration, okay, or what Americans call the Peace Declaration. and the peace treaty or accord, and the stable and lasting peace regime on the Korean Peninsula. We have not been successful. If you look at the Article 3 of the Panmunjom Declaration, it says within this year, okay, we will adopt end-of-war declaration and will make an effort toward a peace regime on the Korean Peninsula. But nothing happened on that score. That is why we are hoping that the Hanoi summit would address this issue. Of course, our government has now changed the position. Initially, our government thought about the no South Korea and the U.S. tripartite, the end-of-war declaration. Now, no South Korea, U.S., China, four-party end-of-war declaration, so that they can just work on negotiation on the peace treaty or accord on the Korean Peninsula. Therefore, on that score, is rather slow. And also, President Moon has been talking about so-called idea of peace building through economy. Okay? He, adopted the so-called new economic map of Korean Peninsula. Okay, and therefore his basic idea is this: he wanted to foster inter-Korean economic exchange and cooperation, and then have free flow of people, goods, and services, so that we can have a de facto unification through economy. But sanction regime has blocked that effort. Therefore, I would say that the peace building, in the sense that achieving de facto unification through economy, has not become plausible because our government complies with UN Security Council sanction resolution 100%. Okay? Not a single foul play, I can assure you. Okay? Therefore, no progress. Nuclear issue, same thing. And our government put a lot of emphasis because the President Moon's basic understanding is this. Okay, he wants kind of de facto unification, peace and integration between North and South through economy. But that would not be possible without peace. Peace would not be possible without denuclearization. Therefore, his starting point is this denuclearization. Without making substantial progress in denuclearization, we cannot reduce or remove the sanctions by Security Council and the United States. Therefore, he has been putting a lot of emphasis on denuclearization issue. But therefore, in that record, but underneath denuclearization issue, the same things. Chairman Kim Jong-un, okay, made words and commitment on Punggye-ri, Dongchang-ri, and Yeongbyon, but only words and commitment, no actions. Therefore, since late December last year, President Moon has been emphasizing that North Korea should show actions. North Korea should show bold moves toward the concrete denuclearization. If I think the Hanoi summit will be addressing those issues. That is overall assessment of inter-Korean relations.
So, I mean, as you say, you were involved in these issues during the Kim Dae-jung administration. You were at the summit, the Roh Moo-hyun administration, and now the Moon Jae-in administration. And through that time, obviously, a lot of things have changed. Most notably, North Korea's nuclear and missile capability has gotten to be a much bigger challenge. But my impression is, generally speaking, it was considered sort of the denuclearization issue was the U.S. issue, and the sort of inter-Korean and peace building was the South Korean issue, and sometimes there was, and the economic issue, and there was obviously some overlap, but they were kind of two different strands. How would you compare the kind of work together that the U.S. and the respective roles of the U.S. and South Korea now to those earlier iterations? I have to say, I have an impression that South Korea is playing a bigger role, but just in general terms. But what's your own sense? Because you watched.
I think that there is a continuation because President Kim Dae-jung has also, at a time, nucleation was not the big issue. Geneva Agreed framework was still alive. Okay, at a time, the issue was how to get rid of North Korean ballistic missile issues. That is why Secretary Albright paid a visit to Pyongyang, and he was discussing with Kim Jong-il about how to deal with this in a ballistic missiles. Nuclear issue was not a big issue. Okay? But the Roh Moo-hyun period, his basic approach, like with the President Moon Jae-in, is a parallel pursuit of denuclearization and peacemaking on the Korean Peninsula. Therefore, but the conservative government make it conditional. Okay, without denuclearization, no exchange and cooperation with North Korea, no discussion on confidence-building measures and peacemaking. But President Moon Jae-in, following the tradition of Kim Dae-jung and Roh Moo-hyun, proposes in a simultaneous pursuit of denuclearization and peacemaking on the Korean Peninsula. It's a kind of two-track approach, but in parallel mode. Okay.
So slightly subtle distinction. I mean, or more than subtle. You think it's yeah. Okay. There. All right. Let's get to the summit now, since we're and we were talking earlier, but for those of you who haven't seen it, not to, we saw a press reporting that's saying what the elements of a planned deal for Hanoi might be. Now, I have no idea if this is true or not, but there are so many elements on the table that we keep talking. There's peace declaration, sanctions relief, Kaesong, Gumgang Mountain, Yongbyon, so on and so forth. I mean, just to kind of get this started, I'd like to get your sense of what you think a kind of a good deal, a doable, a good deal would look like, or process, if you like, coming out of Hanoi. The things that have been mentioned in the press now is that the U.S. and North Korea might sign a peace declaration to at least symbolically end the Korean War. That there would be an agreement to more remains returns. This has been something that's really been emphasized by the Trump administration, certainly had been done in the past, but is now a pillar of the U.S. effort. Establishing liaison offices as a precursor to presumably to establishing full diplomatic relations at some point. And importantly, on the denuclearization front, to stop producing materials, fissile material at Yongbyon, the major nuclear site, at least that we know about and that we've been to before, we being the international community. And in exchange for that there would be some kind of easing of the international sanctions, or agreement by the U.S. to support easing those sanctions, to allow some inter-Korean projects. And the ones that are most often mentioned, of course, are the reopening of the Kaesong Industrial Complex and the Gumgang Mountain Facility. So none of that's too surprising, but that's kind of the mix that's out there now. Does that sound about right to you, or what is there? What would you see as a good outcome for a sustainable process going forward coming out of Hanoi? I know it's a big question, but I'm sure you've thought about it.
Which media, made that kind of report?
Which media? I will quote my source here. Vox.
It's a too good deal for North Korea and too bad deal for the United States. If that kind of deal is made in Hanoi, the next day we'll say that winner North Korea, loser United States. Okay. And shameful diplomacy, that kind of title.
So what more is needed?
No, but think in very simple terms. Okay, now go back to Singapore Declaration. Article 1 of Singapore Declaration is about, so establishing new relationship based on trust. Article 2 is what both leaders have agreed to pursue lasting, stable peace regime on the Korean Peninsula. And third, Article 3 is what? By reconfirming the Panmunjom Declaration, two leaders agreed to make effort toward complete denuclearization. I think these three articles set the general tone, or general outlines, of the future negotiation between U.S. and North Korea. Okay? Then in Hanoi, they'll be working on the details on those three items. Therefore, obvious new relationship based on trust, obvious sanction relief will come first. We get to remember, because North Koreans regard the sanctions as a sign of a hostile intent and policy by the United States. Okay, and establishing liaison offices. Okay, those are very classical steps toward the setting up the new relationship. Second, lasting and stable peace regime on the Korean Peninsula. Obviously, adoption of end of war declaration or peace declaration, they are identical. They all become the introductory part of any form of peace treaty. But without involving South Korea and China, there won't be any kinds of viable peace treaty. Therefore, then on second item, maybe as Secretary Pompeo implied, that there could be new peace mechanism to deal with permanent peace in Korea. Okay? Then maybe there could be follow-up meetings, not only between the North Korea and the U.S., but also involving China and South Korea. Then they'll be talking about that one. Then third one, complete denuclearization. That is a big issue. Okay? But I really don't think that American people can accept just simply suspending production of a nuclear material, fissile materials in Yongbyon. No, in fact, I had a breakfast meeting with some congressmen on the Hill. They wouldn't accept it. Mm-hmm. They should go more than that. Then, what U.S. want? Okay, obviously, final, fully verified dismantling of nuclear facilities, materials, and bombs, and delivery vehicles, missiles. Okay. Then, if I were American negotiator, then I will obviously suspension. Freezing, halt is a very rudimentary step. And then I think they should get into more than that. That is what verified, dismantling of nuclear facilities in Yongbyon and even elsewhere. Okay, but that is what Chairman Kim Jong-un committed himself in the Pyongyang Declaration. Therefore, they should go in that way, and plus, then we should deal with what? Issue of nuclear weapons and missiles. Not only ICBM, but also intermediate range ballistic missile, even short range ballistic missile. Then we got to come up with more clear working mechanism. For that, as Steve Wiggin pointed out at his Stanford speech, the North Korean leader and American leader should come up with some kinds of roadmap for negotiation. Okay. Roadmap for negotiation for dismantling of North Korean nuclear, weapons program. Therefore, that is what I can accept.
So you'd like to see a roadmap coming out of Hanoi, which
roadmap for negotiation.
For negotiations.
And I think Steve Wiggin is right, because in actuality, it's not simply a matter of denuclearization. Okay? Why denuclearization? There is an issue of what? Lack of security, okay, and lack of peace. Then there got to be discussions and peace mechanism, right? And also once you force North Korea to give up something it cherishes too much, then we got to give up some kinds of compensation to North Korea. Then economic and energy compensation. The United States is not willing to pay any, because President Trump's goal is what? I resolve the North Korean nuclear issue without spending a single penny. Then money should come from somewhere else, right? Then here you need, not only the China and South Korea, you need, Japan, Russia, even EU, even Australia. Okay, therefore you got to be involved in multilateral, mechanism to resolve the issue. Therefore, in fact, yesterday Bob Jolly, wrote a very interesting, op-ed in Wall Street Journal. He was saying that they need at least 5 tracks in dealing with North Korean nuclear problem. Okay, therefore, I think there is a more sensible approach, and I sensed that the Trump administration is moving in that direction. That is one of those very positive signs I read.
But coming out of Hanoi, I mean, let's go back to Yongbyon for a minute, because again, that's one of those issues that always comes up. And as you say, Kim Jong-un just publicly pledged a readiness to completely dismantle Yongbyon. And at the same time, you hear a lot of people talk about Yongbyon as the example of the buying the same horse twice, buying the dead horse 3 times, repainting a used car and selling it. I mean, how important is Yongbyon? And I mean, you say that more, and I think it makes more than simply saying we're going to stop producing, we're going to turn it off, however you do that to a nuclear facility. But more than that is needed. I mean, would the dismantlement of Yongbyon, I mean, how significant would that be, and what should be, if you like, the trade-off for that?
I think that, those people who make that kinds of arguments, really out of touch of reality. That they may not be understand the overall dynamics involved in Yongbyon. Okay, as I think the Bloomberg characterized the nuclear facility in Yongbyon as crown jewel of North Korean nuclear and missile program, and I agree with that description. And I do not agree with Tae Hong-ho's, the recent interview. He says, "Oh, he's out of date. There's nothing in there." It's not. Let us go one by one. And I'm not technical person, but Siegfried Hecker has been always a very great source of technical advisor to me. Okay, look, Yongbyon has 5 megawatt nuclear reactor. Okay, it is still producing spent fuel road. Yongbyon has fuel fabrication plant. Yongbyon has a radiochemical reprocessing plant through which they produce plutonium. Yongbyon has what? Uranium hexafluoride lab, production facilities, and tritium, the facility too. Tritium is essential for the production of a hydrogen bomb. And Yongbyon has what? Highly enriched uranium production facilities with more than 2,000 centrifuge systems. Yongbyon has the cutting-edge research and development center for nuclear and missile development. Yongbyon has Yongbyon College of Science and Technology, which is only second to Kim Jong-un Institute of Science and Technology. If North Korea dismantle all these things in verifiable manner, I think it's a big deal. Okay, and then we can search after plus alpha, some hidden production site of highly enriched uranium program. Okay, that will depend upon the degree of success in dealing with those nuclear facilities in Yongbyon. Therefore, I really don't buy, those people say that, oh, we are buying the same old hose, Those who do not know about hose transactions may make that kind of statement, but those who know those stuff, like Siegfried Hecker and Ernie Moniz, former Secretary of Energy, they are saying that's a damn serious deal. Okay? I would, buy this, renowned nuclear expert rather than just a cottage industry person making comments on Yongbyon.
And your sense is that in exchange for that North Korea, should get something fairly significant.
Sure. And that is what President Moon Jae-in, when President Moon Jae-in visited the European Union in November. In fact, he was, when he said that if North Korea takes irreversible stages toward the denuclearization, we got to think about relaxing sanctions against North Korea. And I think he's referring to that one. Verified dismantling of nuclear facilities in Yongbyon is a big deal, and North Korea deserves, some kinds of concession in the form of, relaxation of economic sanctions against North Korea.
Okay, thanks. Let me get to another thing that is much discussed, and that is this idea that there are different concepts of this word I don't really like, of denuclearization, bihekwa, right? And that the two sides, especially the United States and the DPRK, need to come to a common understanding. It seems to me that both sides, in a sense, have been very clear about what they think denuclearization is, and actually they are different. You have the U.S. talking now, whether it's CVID or now FFD, VD. But basically, to put it in layman's language, that North Korea should not have a nuclear weapons capability or stockpile or program. Right? And that should be verifiably dismantled what they have, and they shouldn't have in the future. That's how I would define that, sort of. And on the other hand, I think what we've seen in public statements from the DPRK in their press is that they see the denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula in a far more, shall I say, strategic way, and involving the security postures of the United States in the region, its alliances, and more of not only a program of step-by-step in exchange for confidence building and economic growth, but also for steps that the United States should take, and the Republic of Korea implicitly in its security posture. Do you think it's possible to get to an agreement right now on what denuclearization is?
No, I think that the concept of complete denuclearization is mutually understood, 100%.
You do?
Yeah, President Moon Jae-in has to keep telling about complete denuclearization to Chairman Kim Jong-un numerous times.
Mm-hmm.
Therefore, I don't see North Korea has a different interpretation of complete denuclearization. But complete denuclearization is what? Final goal, okay? Which refers to what? Really what? Verifiable dismantling of nuclear facilities and nuclear materials and nuclear bombs and their delivery vehicles. It's clear. North Korea understand. We understand. But in terms of approach to that final goal, there's a difference. Okay? For example, we have been arguing the denuclearization of North Korea first. And North Korea is saying that that's nonsensical. We are under, South Korea is under American nuclear umbrella. Okay? How we can denuclearize without touching that issue, that kind of issue. But however, North Korea has not raised the issue of American nuclear umbrella in the South. Okay? Occasional editorial in Nodong Shinmun raised that issue, but they haven't.
Not in negotiations.
Not issue. And another big issue is this: the whole rollback and ultimate dismantling. Okay? Therefore, Siegfried Hacker would suggest that first we got to make a capping or halting or freezing first. Okay? All the nuclear production facilities, okay? Both plutonium and highly enriched uranium. Then second stage moving in is what? Rollback is moving back to old position, meaning reduction. Okay? And eventually dismantling. Okay? But there's some differences, that kinds of sequencing. Okay? But other than that, the goal is very clear. There should be no nuclear weapons in both North and South Korea. South Korea has been abiding by, joint declaration on the denuclearized Korean Peninsula, 한반도 비핵화 선언 of 1992. Since then on, we do not have any nuclear production facilities. Okay? We do not manufacture nuclear weapons. We do not engage in nuclear testing. We do not proliferate any nuclear technology, whatever, to outside. Therefore, we have been abiding by, the joint declaration on the denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula. But whole point is this: therefore, when you talk about complete denuclearization, logic is very simple. If North Korea returns to NPT regime, non-proliferation treaty regime, then that can be seen as the most important step toward the denuclearization.
Do you think it's a difficult thing for the DPRK to pledge to return to the NPT? I mean, they did that in 2005 during the six-party talks. Of course, it didn't happen. But would that be a significant step for them to pledge to return?
It is much more difficult because being under the NPT regime, only 5 countries are allowed to have a nuclear weapons.
Right.
But those who have a nuclear weapon, such as Pakistan, India, Israel, they are not members of NPT. But if North Korea decides to return to NPT, that means what? North Korea does not want to have nuclear weapons, okay? And will not produce any nuclear, materials, fissile materials, or whatever. Okay? Will be under the very tight and scrutinized, inspection by International Atomic Energy Agency, okay, under its safeguard clause, okay. Therefore, in other words, NPT regime. Return to NPT regime will come after there is a complete denuclearization. Therefore, return to NPT won't be that easy.
So
but that is our goal,
It's our goal, but even for them to pledge it, they might feel it's too early.
But if North Korea return to NPT regime, then North Korea will be entitled to peaceful use of atomic energy.
Right.
They can use atomic energy for agricultural purposes, medical purposes, and even power generation.
Right.
Okay.
Right. Okay. I'm going to ask you one more question, and then I assume we have some questions here, which I will pepper you with, as if I haven't been doing that already. But I wanted to just touch, well, more than touch on, but get your sense about, all that other constellation of issues that would be a part of the DPRK becoming a full member of the international community and having better relations not only with South Korea but with the U.S. and the rest of the international community, and that that includes, very prominently the issue of human rights in the DPRK. It also includes the concerns we have about their cyber policy, biological weapons, you can go on and on, chemical weapons and so on, but abiding by international standards in these areas. With respect to human rights, it's been noted by many here that the Trump administration early on, in particular when President Trump gave his State of the Union now last year, right, 2018, he highlighted that issue in a rather, I'd say, I'm trying to be careful with my words here, aggressive fashion, I suppose you'd say, but he stopped talking about it. There are the other issues as well. My general question for you is where does that fit into this very complicated and I agree with you, quite long process that we're embarked on? And in particular, maybe you could give me, I know it's very sensitive for any South Korean government, but how does the Moon administration see the issue of human rights in North Korea and what the most potentially productive and positive approach to that would be?
Our government realized the importance of human rights, and President Moon himself was a human rights lawyer. Okay? As with President Kim Dae-jung and President Roh Moo-hyun, President Moon Jae-in is getting similar kind of criticism from the human rights people. But President Moon seems to have
whoops. Censored again.
President Moon seems to have a very clear way of prioritizing the agenda. For him, let us solve the nuclear and the missile issue, first, and in the process, if we can build the trust with North Korea, then we can raise human rights issues, cybersecurity issues, biochemical issues. Okay, but other than that, while we are confronting with North Korea, if we raise human rights issues, then North Korea will be arguing that, that is your hostile intent and policy against us. We won't talk with you. That can really, derail the entire negotiation. And also, one important thing is this: North Korean leaders know that they cannot have diplomatic normalization with the United States without solving the human rights issues. They are very well aware of it. Therefore, if progress is being made, then I expect North Korea will be making some kinds of, goodwill gesture toward the human rights issues. But remember, human rights cannot be imposed from outside. North Korean people should achieve democracy and human rights from within. What we can do is very simple in creating external environment. Therefore, it's North Koreans to decide. Okay, but one thing is very clear. If you build some kind of trust with North Korea, then you can raise the issue of human rights. Needless to say, cybersecurity and biochemical issues.
Have these been topics at all in the inter-Korean talks so far?
No, we do not have those issues on the official agenda. Okay, but again, the whole point is this: if you still feel some kinds of hostility in each other, then you cannot put those kinds of agenda up front. Okay, but eventually, if inter-Korean relations get improved, then I think that our government officials will be raising this issue.
Thank you. All right, I'm going to turn. I've got a pretty good stack of questions here, and the one on top, I don't know if you put these in particular order, is from Adam Taylor of the Washington Post. And he actually has two questions. If you forget the second one, I'll remind you in a minute because they're both different. One is, we always like it when our visitors comment on our politics. So do you think there is a real split in the Trump administration about North Korea? And what problems might that cause? I mean, you and I are both veterans of serious splits in earlier American administrations about North Korea policy. Do you see those kinds of tensions currently in Washington?
Yeah, there is a rumor that John Bolton has been trying to sabotage that kinds of things. Steve Biegun is active up front, and Pompeo is tilting toward Steve Biegun and whatever. But I think the one thing is clear: if President Trump makes deal at Hanoi, the entire Trump administration will be unified. But if he fails, then there will be division within the Trump administration. Then the division, cleavage, can be much worse. Okay? Therefore, that is why President Trump has every reason to make the Hanoi summit successful.
I think it's going to be, my prediction is there'll be a deal. People may differ on,
then there will be
a
unity.
Good deal. Yeah, okay.
If there is a deal, there will be unity within the Trump administration.
And the other question is to dig a little bit more on what we were talking about earlier. What sanctions relief specifically could the U.S. provide that would help with the inter-Korean talks process?
No, in fact, U.S. When you talk about sanctions against North Korea, you have United Nations Security Council sanction resolutions, and American unilateral sanction, and unilateral sanction by South Korea, Japan, European Union. Okay. But here, most important thing is a United Nations Security Council resolution. That's universal, okay? But there could be several things can be done. For example, U.S. can alleviate all these travel ban on North Korea, humanitarian assistance to North Korea, those kinds of things.
Its own bilateral
bilateral, and at the multilateral, maybe United Nations Security Council can come up with some kinds of resolution or ad hoc arrangement in which that would allow inter-Korean economic exchange and cooperation, okay, including resumption of Kaesong Industrial Complex and the resumption of Mount Kumgang Tourist Project. Even Kaesong, then there will be issue of the whole issue of bulk cash transfer to North Korea. Which can be used for the production of weapons of mass destructions and missiles. But then we can come up with some kinds of Iranian kinds of formula. Therefore, maybe our government can work with North Korea in such a way that we pay wages to North Korean workers directly. Okay? Meanwhile, we can create some kinds of Bill is now raising hand, and that has been his ideas too. At the same time, I must remind that, okay, months in the past, we are paying about $13 million US per month. Then almost half of them go to North Korean workers as wages. The remainder can be set into, put into some kinds of escrow account, a South Korean bank which was designated by North Korea. Then North Koreans can use that money, okay, in buying raw materials, intermediate goods or consumer goods from South Korea. Then in that way we can prevent the transfer of bulk cash. But as to the Mount Kumgang Tourist Project, it's really our government decision rather than UN and resolution per se. But if individuals make a trip to Mount Kumgang without through the Hyundai Asan, then we cannot impose. That does not violate the UN Security Council sanctions. Individuals go there and pay individually. It's not bulk cash, right? If it's a matter of our government commitment. But again, our government, even though we know that one, but in order to not undermine our relationship with the United States, we have not taken any actions. But if there is some progress made in Hanoi, then why not? And also, I understand that the American government would not oppose that kinds of things. Therefore, our government has been taking extremely cautious approach to these issues. But I think those kinds of things we can think about.
But is it your understanding that some kind of UN Security Council action, or at least the Sanctions Committee action, would be required, or some kind of waiver or exception to reopen Kumgang and to reopen Kaesong? There would have to be something like that.
Yeah, it could be a waiver clause, or they can adopt a separate Security Council resolution about the new provision and whatever. It's up to the discussions. Therefore, and I think all concerned parties should talk with the Sanction Committee on that issue.
But the South Korean government is not looking, at least at this time, or envisioning something coming out that would look for a complete removal of a UN sanction, a UN resolution.
No, because there is some concern that if there is a complete removal of United Nations sanctions without corresponding measures by North Korea, nobody can, particularly U.S. cannot accept that kind of things. Another one is if there is a comprehensive relaxation of sanction measures against North Korea, then a lot of American people raised the issue about the China factor, Russian factor. Okay, then the entire sanction regime could be weakened. Therefore, we can just make it inter-Korean economic exchange and cooperation, what we call the intranational economic transactions, as an exception.
Do you think China would support that?
Oh yeah, I think so.
Okay. Okay, another question. From South Korea's perspective, what would be a bad U.S. North Korea deal in Hanoi?
Bad one of those leaders just bursting out of the negotiating room. Therefore, no deal. That's the worst deal. Okay. And another worst deal, our concern is this: anything concerned about the changing status of American forces in South Korea, in return some kind of deal, be it, dismantling of ICBM and whatever. And a lot of South Koreans, even Americans, will consider it a bad deal. When I had breakfast meeting with congressmen, they also raised that issue. That will be a bad deal, But other than that, there won't be such a thing as a bad deal, okay? Because there will be progress in the dismantling of North Korean nuclear, facilities, materials, if not weapons. Even they will be talking about missile too. Therefore, I think that there will be no such a thing as a bad deal, other than those circumstances.
Now, I was in Seoul, as you know, about 10 days ago, and I felt in Seoul there was kind of a palpable relief on everyone's part that the SMA, the Special Measures Agreement, burden sharing agreement, had been finalized, and so that kind of, I think, tamped down a little bit of the worry and speculation that somehow, burden sharing or U.S. troops on the peninsula might somehow enter into the summit discussion.
I don't think so. And President Trump made it very clear. The status of American forces in South Korea is not on the agenda. If President Trump said so, then we got to trust it.
Can I ask if Kim Jong-un, I guess I am asking, has Kim Jong-un ever raised the status of U.S. forces in South Korea in discussions?
Early September, the Ambassador Jung Yong and the Director Seo-hun paid a visit to Pyongyang to prepare for Pyongyang summit. In fact, I was told that when there was discussion on that topic, and Chairman Kim Jong-un is said to state that, yes, end of war declaration had nothing to do with American forces in South Korea, as well as ROK-US alliance. Okay. I don't know whether it was confirmed or not, but there is what was reported in the news report. And also another important point is this: what is the purpose of American forces in South Korea? And as long as American forces do not have any hostile intent and policy against North Korea has been saying that we have no objection. That is what Kim Jong-un did in 1992 when he met Harold Cantor. That is what Chairman Kim Jong-il told to President Kim Dae-jung. Okay? Therefore, it's very clear. There is what is the role, function, and objective of American forces in South Korea. It is against North Korea that North Korea will oppose it. If not, there is no reason why they strongly oppose the continued presence of American forces in South Korea.
And the fact that the final paragraph of the armistice of 1953 envisions the removal of all foreign forces from the Korean Peninsula in the event of a peace settlement, not something that seems to be...
Well, they should have done within 3 months after signing of the armistice agreement. But
that's old. That's old history now. Yeah. Okay. This is an interesting question. We're really working you here, but thanks for great questions. What role will the chaebol, the big businesses, play in the economic unification of the two Koreas?
Chaebol is very much interested. When I went to Pyongyang during the third Korean summit, Lee Jae-yong went, the vice chairman of Samsung Group went there, Choi Tae-won, chairman of SK Group, and Gu Kwang-mo, new chairman of LG, went there, along with Lee Jae-won, one of so-called the entrepreneur, and they all went there. Their point is this: if there is no American sanctions, they will go instantly. But as long as there is American sanctions, as long as America has some kinds of doubt on North Korea, they cannot make any big decision. There's United States of America has all the wild cards in hand.
There were rumors that Kim Jong-un might visit a Samsung plant or something in Hanoi, but I'm not sure that's.
Yeah, but one thing is clear: that when I visited Pyongyang in September, Chairman Kim Jong-un and his immediate step, primary attention was on only two chaebol leaders. Political leaders, people like me, out of purview. Only chaebol leaders. They always sat near to Kim Jong-un. Okay, wherever they go, they were entertained by the key members of Korea Workers' Party. But that really shows where is a preference of North Korea.
That's really interesting. This is kind of related then. The next question. What are the less publicized but still important actors who can help make progress in DPRK denuclearization? In a sense, you talked about chaebol as maybe actors we don't always think about, but the UN or NGOs, are there other actors inside North Korea or South Korea that are playing a role that's maybe not so visible to us here?
They can be useful, but the United States is the only actor, with possibly China. Is why North Korea is possessing nuclear weapons? But they're saying that, because of American nuclear threat. If the American nuclear threat is gone, then they should give up their nuclear weapons. Then who else can intervene in between? Once two actors, the United States and North Korea, once they make a deal, then afterwards, and other actors can join. Okay? For example, if North Korea gives up its nuclear weapons, then there can be economic assistance to North Korea, then chaebols and others can join. Energy assistance to North Korea, they can join. And after nuclear issues resolved, then it's time for us to raise the issue of human rights and etc. Then Amnesty International can join. But ultimately, key decision makers are Trump and Kim Jong-un.
And this is a slightly different question, but building on that, I mean, you did mention earlier that there needs to be, at some point, and I think you were implying fairly early on, if there's progress, a way of drawing into a peace regime, or I forgot which word we're using, a peace mechanism, China, Japan, Russia. The Chinese still sometimes talk about a resumption of the six-party talks. I mean, whether it's the six-party talks or something else, I mean, do you think there needs, at some point, some kind of more, formalized multilateral approach makes sense? And is there a role for the UN? I know that's been talked about over time, but how would you see?
So my, point is, 2+4 kind of setting. North-South Korea bilateral talks, North Korean U.S. bilateral talks. Then those two tracks should lead to the four-party talks involving North-South Korea, U.S. and China. And then entire peace regime can be discussed in that process. But the peace and security in the Korean Peninsula cannot be conceived without making corresponding favorable security environment in Northeast Asia. Therefore, then additional two, Japan and Russia, should be involved in it. Therefore, I would personally argue the six-party talk would be very good. And Thomas Pickering and Morton Halperin and Peter Hayes, they have been all proposing there got to be Northeast Asian Security Summit conference, okay, and so that there can be, utmost leaders' commitment, peace and stability in Northeast Asia, which in turn can assure ongoing peace regime on the Korean Peninsula.
That's good. This is back to something we've touched on already, but just to dig in a little more, the question is, does the U.S. presence in South Korea, and I think he means the military presence here, have more to do with containing China now than in defending against North Korea? And what would be the impact of a peace deal on the alliance?
But as I pointed out, in other words, President Moon, you may recall the entire fiasco May last year. I contributed an article in Foreign Affairs. What I simply said was it would be very difficult to justify continuing presence of American troops in South Korea after the adoption of peace treaty. This I wrote, and then one newspaper in Korea put the headline saying, "Moon Tukbo, special advisor Moon advocate withdrawal of American forces from South Korea after the peace treaty is done." But even that after peace treaty is adopted, also removed. Just special advisor Moon advocate withdrawal of American forces from South Korea, and then that made me very, very famous in South Korea, and all of a sudden I become anti-American. Okay, but after that one, that became the big issue in South Korea, and I got a phone call from the Kim Jong-un, who was the chief of staff to President Moon Jae-in, that President Moon asked him to convey the following message. The following message was this: American forces in South Korea and ROK U.S. alliance are matters between two sovereign countries. Therefore, they have nothing to do with the end of war declaration or peace treaty on the Korean Peninsula. There was the words given to me from President Moon, conveyed by Kim Jong-un. But I think that is right. Okay. But in the long run, we do not know. But as Kissinger, Keynes said, after all, in the long run, we all die. But the whole point is that. But at least in short term and medium term, and I think the American forces in South Korea will be extremely valuable, not only for the regional strategic stability, but also for domestic political peace. If that issue become a hot issue, the entire South Korea will be polarized 100%. Then that will be a real curse for us. Then that peace would bring that kinds of curse, and I personally do not want that kind of curse. Not only for regional stability, but also for domestic peace in Korea, we need to continuing presence of American forces in South Korea.
I was commenting to Professor Moon earlier that this phrase I only learned recently, but now I seem to hear all the time, of the Overton window, right? Of kind of what the acceptable parameters of what's considered to be, respectable, intelligent, informed discourse within the circles in which, policy people move, has kind of expanded when it comes to talking about the Korean Peninsula. And some of that has to do with our very unconventional president here, but also has to do with we're living in changing times. But I think you got your fingers caught in the Overton window there with that quote. But I think there is also a question of China's long term, and maybe that's for another discussion we can have sometime and the U.S.-China relationship, which I think sometimes understandably is in the background of these discussions, but also very relevant. Another, though, really big question, if we're not wearing you out too much, and you've touched on it, but if you could just spell it out a little bit more, what is the vision, I guess your vision, of President Moon's vision, of a peacefully unified Korea? And you emphasize the importance of economic ties. Can you kind of spell that out a little bit more broadly?
But when you talk about unification, there is a kind of misunderstanding. we Koreans want one single unified nation state. That means what? One nation, one state, one system, and one government. That is our dream and vision. But from practical point of view, it is unachievable. Okay? Because either North Korea should be absorbed by South Korea, or South Korea should be communized by North Korea. Other than two conditions, that kinds of unification will be unachievable. Then what is the alternative? The North Korean proposal is so-called federation or confederation. Meaning what? One nation, one state, two systems, and two local governments. But again, under one state having North Korean communist socialist system and South Korean capitalist system, living in one house called Korea, is virtually impossible. Here comes then our South Korean proposal. South Korean proposal is what? One nation, two states, and two systems, and two governments. But we have institutionalized cooperation and integration, like the European Union. That is what No Tae-woo proposed. That is what Kim Dae-jung proposed. That is a union of North-South Korean states. Then we have regularized the summit talk, regularized ministerial talks, parliamentary talks, and then we can create some kinds of policy measure to allow free flow of people, goods, and services. But when we can reach the kinds of degree of integration between North and South Korea, if not unification, then peace will be much nearer, right? And therefore, then how can you achieve that kind of things? President Moon thinks that through economic cooperation, therefore he called the 평화경제론, okay? Peaceful economy and also peace through economy. Okay? But to that, then railroad connection, energy networks, economic community, are the kinds of ideas he has. But problem is this: as long as UN sanctions and American unilateral sanctions, nothing can be done. Then again, in order to have that kinds of de facto unification, North Korean nuclear issue should be resolved. Therefore, we are coming to reality. Therefore, North Korean nuclear is not just fictional issue, that's a real issue. We got to resolve. Otherwise, we cannot achieve peace. Otherwise, we cannot achieve some form of peaceful unification between North and South Korea.
And do you think in that kind of scenario that a Kim dynasty, a Kim regime could endure, given that you're asking the kind of the 20 million people of North Korea to, in a sense, be patient with very incremental change?
That's a North Korean choice, and I don't mention about North Korean choice. Okay, it's up to their leader and his choice. Okay.
Another great question here. I'm going to. How can Congress, and as you mentioned, you met a number of Congress members today. How can Congress play a role in the talks? They've been a hurdle in the past. We can remember, you were talking about the funding. Even the agreed framework, you recall, was not funded by the Congress, but it's just changed hands from the Democrats to the Republicans shortly after it was agreed. And now I'll continue with and could now be, between the Democrats and a Republican president. Can Congress play a role in either empowering or derailing talks?
In the United States, Congress is the most important actor. Congress is very, very important actor. But what is important is I hope the congressmen and women would not have some kinds of prejudice and bias against North Korea on the Korean Peninsula. I hope that they can have much more objective understanding of what's going on in the Korean Peninsula, and their cooperation is essential. Without their help, nothing can be done. The issue of denuclearization, issue of compensation mechanism, issue of sanctions and whatever. Therefore, congressional concern is vital to the success of Korean Odyssey.
Yeah, I agree. All right, I'm going to try to get through a couple more of these.
More?
Well, two more, and then we'll give you a break. Okay, are North Korean nuclear weapons for deterrence against the U.S. And the ROK and regime survival, or are they for, and you've heard this argument, for reunification of the entire peninsula under DPRK leadership? You know, this is the argument, which I'm sure you've heard quite a bit, that the real goal here is to blackmail South Korea, basically, right, with nuclear weapons. And this gets into kind of the bad deal that you alluded to earlier. That
why we're having alliance with the United States, why we are paying extraordinary amount of defense cost sharing. Okay. Very simple. We need America because North Korea is a source of threat. Okay. That's a very simple one. Therefore, that really assumes that progressive President Moon Jae-in is willing to sever ties with the United States. That being the case, then we'll be under constant blackmail of North Korea. But it's a very fictional question. Okay. But President Moon Jae-in made it very clear. I want to have an airtight relationship with the United States. Okay.
I think it also gets to a sense of kind of the mood and attitude of the South Korean people as well. I don't know if you want to say a word about that. I mean, I have my own views, I guess, about South Koreans' commitment to democracy. But
no. But Andrew Kim, who accompanied Pompeo to Pyongyang, 6 times, and 4 or 5 times, and whatever, he said that his talk at Stanford, that is what Kim Jong-un told Secretary Pompeo, that I'm father, okay, and I'm husband, and I don't want my children to live under the threat of nuclear weapons. And I think that really carries some kinds of message from him. Therefore, as South Korea is under fear of North Korean nuclear threat, North Korea will be under constant threat. But if North Korea really possesses nuclear weapons and strengthen nuclear weapons, North Korea will face 10, 100, and 1,000 times more threat coming from the United States. Even from Japan too. Even from South Korea, we are not staying idle. We'll come up with corresponding measures. Therefore, it is better for North Korea to give up nuclear weapons if terms are right. Okay. Then we should work on how to make the terms acceptable on both sides.
Okay, so that leads me up to my last question here. So this is because you always make news, so this is your chance to make some news here.
No, I don't want to make news.
I mean, maybe you already have, but yeah. Do you think that, and there's only 2 people here, not 3 people mentioned, but do you think that President Moon Jae-in or President Donald Trump deserve the Nobel Peace Prize? And have you sent in the nomination?
But you don't work for peace to get prizes. Okay? If you work hard, then the Nobel Peace Prize will come from the heaven, like manna from heaven. Therefore, don't expect anything. Work hard and deliver peace. Then they can get even greater award than Nobel Peace Prize.
And peace is a process.
Peace is a process.
All right. You've been very generous with your thoughts and your time. Any final thoughts or words? Or we're always happy when you come here.
Enough is done. From the 7 o'clock in the morning that I've been working.
Yeah.
My voice needs some rest.
All right. Well, please join me in thanking Moon Jae-in, a great friend of ours. Thank you. Thank you. Thanks very much. That's great.